So you're always hearing about GDP on the news, right? These huge multi-trillion-dollar numbers. But what do they actually mean? Today, we're going to decode the language of national income and figure out what's really happening behind those massive figures. Let's dive in.
I mean, think about it. How on earth do you measure the economic health of an entire country? It seems, well, kind of impossible. But there is a system, and we're going to break it down together piece by piece.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics, then we'll get into the details. Where stuff is made, how we account for wear and tear, what things really cost, and how it all connects back to your wallet. And finally, we'll ask the big question. Does this number actually tell the whole story?
All right, let's get started. First things first, before we get into all the fancy terms, we need to agree on what it is we're actually trying to measure.
At its absolute core, it's pretty simple. We're just trying to add up the value of everything a country makes in a year. Every car, every cup of coffee, every single haircut. Now, the key word here is final. We only count the finished car, not the steel and the tires that went into it. Otherwise, we'd be counting the same things over and over again.
Okay, you got the basic idea? Good. Now let's add our first little twist. Because it turns out where something is made and who made it, those are two totally different questions, and economists are interested in both. Just think of it like a pizza shop, right? The domestic product is all the pizza made inside your kitchen. It's all about the geography. But the national product is all the pizza made by your chefs, even if one of them is catering an event next door. That's about citizenship, not location. See the difference?
So how do we get from the kitchen view to the chef view? Well, there's a pretty simple calculation for that. We just take all the income our citizens earned working abroad, and then we subtract the income that foreigners earned working here. That little number is the bridge that connects domestic and national product. Simple as that.
All right, next piece of the puzzle. Making stuff, it isn't free, right? Machines get old, equipment wears out, the pizza ovens don't last forever. We have to factor that in.
So when you hear the term gross product, that's the big all-inclusive number. Gross just means we haven't taken out any of those costs yet. It's kind of like your full salary on paper before they take out taxes and all that other stuff. It's the whole pie.
And that wear and tear has a name, depreciation. It's the official term for the value of all the equipment in buildings that get used up in the process of making things over the year. It's a real cost of doing business.
And this is where it all comes together. The only difference between gross and net is whether you subtract that depreciation. Gross is the big number with it. Net is the smaller number without it. So if you want to know what's left after we've paid to maintain all our tools, you're looking for the net product.
Okay, we're almost there. Just one last major piece to assemble. And it's this. The price the factory gets for something isn't always the price you pay at the store. And the reason for that, well, it's the government. Think of it as a little journey. It starts with what's called factor cost. That's what the producer gets paid. Then the government steps in and adds things like sales tax, which makes the price go up. But sometimes the government also gives subsidies, which can push the price down. And what you're left with at the end is the market price, what you actually pay. This example with the rice makes it super clear, right? Let's say it costs 50 rupees to produce a kilo of rice. That's the factor cost. But if the government gives the farmer a 5 rupee subsidy for every kilo, what do you pay in the store? Only 45. The market price is actually lower than what it costs to make. So to simplify all this, economists bundle it up into one term, net indirect taxes. It's just the total of all the taxes minus the total of all the subsidies. This number is the wedge, the gap between what the producer gets and what the consumer pays.
Okay, now for the really cool part. We've got all our Lego bricks, gross versus net, domestic versus national, and market price versus factor cost. Let's snap them all together and see how these giant economic figures actually connect back to your life.
And boom, here it is, the master key. This chart shows how you can mix and match all those terms we just learned. The big one you always hear about, GDP EMP, gross domestic product at market prices, is right there. But economists often argue that the real national income is actually NNPFC, net national product at factor cost. Why? Because it tells you what the nation's citizens actually earned after you take out depreciation and the effects of taxes and subsidies. This chart is your decoder ring for all those acronyms.
But let's be real for a second. What does a multi-trillion-dollar number actually mean for you or for me? A country's GDP can be massive, but that doesn't really tell you what's going on in an average person's bank account.
And that's where this term comes in, personal disposable income. This is the one that hits home. It's not about what the country produced, It's about how much money people and households have left to spend or save after all the taxes are paid. This is the nation's actual take-home pay.
And getting there is pretty straightforward. You start with all the income people get. Wages, sure, but also things like government benefits. Then you subtract what they have to pay in direct taxes. And what's left? That's your disposable income. That's the money you actually control, the money you can either spend or save.
So, we've built up this whole incredible system for measuring an economy. But, and this is a big but, before we wrap up, we have to talk about a crucial point. These numbers, they just don't tell the whole story.
Yeah, this is so important to keep in mind. You can have a sky-high GDP, but what if all that wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few people? The number doesn't show you that. It also completely ignores all the valuable unpaid work that happens, like taking care of your kids or an elderly parent. And think about it. It treats $1 spent building a school exactly the same as $1 spent building a weapon. The number itself doesn't have any moral judgment.
So, we'll end on this thought. GDP is a powerful, powerful tool, but it's not a perfect measure of a country's success or its people's happiness. And that forces us to ask a really important question. If one number can't capture it all, what else should we be looking at? What else really matters? And that's a debate that's happening right now all over the world. Thanks for digging into the numbers with me today.